Over 5 million people all around the world suffer from ulcerative colitis. And I've got a special guest today who does suffer from UC. And we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about gut health in general. And we're going to be talking about why we never see meat or eggs or bacon in our poop, but we do see plants. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my friend Lee. On YouTube, he is Kent Carnivore because he lives in Kent. Lee, tell us a little about yourself and how you came to be talking about the carnivore diet.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if I start with my childhood, I was relatively normal child, quite healthy. I was probably a little bit more neurotic than most people, but it wasn't until I got to 2012, and I was about 24 years old at that point, when I got my diagnosis of Crohn, ulcerative colitis, IBD. So basically, it started out with just having a few bowel movements that were not normal. There was blood and pus and things like that, nasty symptoms. And I actually sort of ignored the first two flares because they were quite mild. They didn't last for too long and they just went. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm fine. The third time I flared, I thought, okay, I've obviously got a problem. I better get it checked out. So we ran some tests and things like that. And that's when I came back with the diagnosis of ulcerative colitis. So my colon was basically being attacked by, healthy tissue in my colon by my immune system. It was very low end to begin with, so quite mild as well. And I managed to go the first 2 years without medication. So it wasn't until 2014 when the flares seemed to be noticeably worse. That's when I started taking the specific oral medication. I actually don't remember the name, but it was to lower bowel frequency movements and to just suppress the symptoms during a flare. I felt like I was being addressed and I was on the right track here. But the truth is I wasn't getting any better. The flares would continue to come. They were actually lasting longer and were happening more frequently throughout the year. The doctors told me to up the fiber. They said to increase, fruits, vegetables, switch for brown from white rice, brown bread from white bread, whole grains, and just to eat a balanced, healthy diet. And I was taking the medication, and despite taking all of their advice, 3 years later, 2017 comes and I flare for the last time. Deep down, I felt like I knew that it was the last time. It was so severe. It was almost like I knew there was no going back one way or the other. And I mean, the very first day of my flare, I was sort of going more than 15 times immediately, which was really, really quite severe. I'd been 10, I'd been 12 times. But this last time, despite all the fiber, despite all of the medication I was taking, was very, very, very serious. Like I felt like I was poisoned. I remember laying down on the couch, maybe for 10 minutes, and I would have to go to the toilet. The only toilet we had was upstairs. And so I was taking myself upstairs, and towards the end, this was occurring 30 times over the course of a day.
Yep.
So it just relentless, exhausting to basically, by the time I got downstairs and laid down and got reasonably comfortable, I was getting signals to go straight back upstairs again and sit on the toilet. So yeah, very aggressive and relentless. And I remember thinking, I haven't got another day in me. I genuinely believed that. I wasn't getting better. I remember on YouTube, I saw a video about juicing cabbages. I don't know if you've heard about this. So I started to juice the cabbages, and I was taking my medication with the cabbage juice, and the medication was coming out intact. It was just so bad. And little did I know at the time, I was actually shedding parts of my colon. I was on the way to an emergency situation with perforation and that kind of thing. So after the last 2 days of going 30 times a day, I was now in the hospital, and they just ran some tests. They wanted to see, put me on steroids, get me out of trouble. We'll run some tests to see what the situation is. Judging by the sound of their voice, I take it that they didn't really believe that I was as severe as I was saying it was, because the last time they saw me, it was low end and quite mild. But then, without taking the anesthetic, I could see what they could see in their reactions when they were doing the sigmoid endoscopy. That the whole colon was riddled, and there's basically a very little chance of me getting out of the hospital in remission. They trialed me on a final, it was a trial drug, a very strong immunosuppressant drug, which they deemed was about 50% 90% chance of me getting out of remission, you know, avoiding the surgery, at least at that point. And I was on it for 2 days longer than I should have been, and it didn't work. So they came in and they told me, you know, sorry to break it to you, but in the morning you're going to have to come down and see us. We're going to take your colon out. And so the rest is history. I mean, I recovered in hospital. The stoma nurses come around. So if anybody doesn't know what stoma is, it's basically the part of the intestine that protrudes through the abdominal wall. I had an ileostomy. So I've lost my entire colon, but I have everything intact down to my ileum. I then have an ostomy bag that goes on. So these stoma nurses came around. They drew a little circle on my stomach and said, this is where your stoma is going to be. This is how it all works. You know, these are the bags. They sorted me out a company to order the bags. By the time I got home, I was independent. I could kind of manage and take care of myself and things. And that's it, really. I ended up obviously getting home, and I was very, very, very thin and emaciated. I still need to build a lot of tissue back, and obviously there was a long recovery. I was just about able to lay down onto my flat bed, because at the hospital you could kind of lower yourself gently, you know. But I remember it was quite a thing to try and get straight into a flat bed with all the abdominal pain and the scar and everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for our viewers, we're going to be talking about poop in this video. We're going to be talking about poop a lot in this video, very graphically. And so if you're feeling a little squeamish today, you might want to just watch this another day when your constitution is feeling a little stronger. So I've got a graphic up on the screen, Lee. And so this is your gastrointestinal system. And so out of the stomach empties into the duodenum or the duodenum, depending on where you're at in the world. That it's called pronounced two different ways. And then that empties into the ileum, the jejunum, which is the second part of the small intestine. And then that empties into the ileum, which is the third and final part of the small intestine. Then the ileum, you can see listed on the screen here, there's a little valve between it and the cecum of the colon called the ileocecal valve. And so then everything from the small intestine, everything you've eaten, empties into the cecum, which is the very first part of the large intestine. And then it goes through the remainder of the large intestine and out of the anus. Now, in humans, we have a very small cecum, but in other primates, they have a much, much larger cecum. And so let me show you what Lee went through. So here is the colectomy that he had. So they took out his entire large intestine and left a stump of the anus and rectum. And they do that very oftentimes just so things still kind of seem normal, feel normal in your perineal area. And then also with hopes maybe one day we can reconnect this guy. But I think that you've already implied that that's probably not going to happen. And so the little round thing in the center of the screen, that is the ostomy. That's what is coming through Lee's abdomen. And I actually grabbed a screen grab off his video. You see the bag where he raised his shirt up. That is the bag that his ileum empties into through the ostomy. And so what would normally go into your large intestine and finally out of the back door in the bathroom empties into this bag. And so not by Lee's choice, but by just the events in his life, he is able to see what would go into his large intestine normally, because he has to change this bag several times a day. And so if he eats a food that produces a lot of gas, this balloon will blow up, this bag will blow up like a balloon. If he eats a food that's not digested or takes a medicine that's not digested, he sees that visually in the bag. There's no experiment required. He just looks at the bag and goes, oh, look, there's so-and-so. And so I want everybody to understand the anatomy here of what's going on. And so I think there was probably hope initially that Lee might be reconnected and be able to have normal bowel movements again. But I think your latest update said, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. You're going to have to wind up having a proctectomy.
That's right. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. And so let's talk about, so you were initially diagnosed in when?
2012 was my diagnosis.
2012, and they diagnosed you with a colonoscopy, and they took biopsies. Is that how they made the diagnosis?
Yeah, they took biopsies. I had a sigmoid endoscopy, I think it was at first.
Yeah.
And they took biopsies and they came back with that diagnosis.
Gotcha. And then, so before you were officially diagnosed, had you noticed any pattern of, if I eat this food, I don't seem to do as well, or if I avoid this food, I tend to do better?
So this is really interesting. Up to this point, when I even started to have the first symptom, I got away with eating the spiciest foods on the planet. I got away with eating absolutely everything, and I loved all food. That if you said, like, I went round a friend's house and he's like, "What would you like?" A bit of everything. That was me. I loved it all, and I never really seemed to pay for it. So there's probably a lot of people that feel like they're getting away with certain things, and they're probably not, because I was totally unaware until I started to notice some blood. As obviously the years progressed, as I was flaring and I'd got my diagnosis, I just would pick up on things that potentially would cause harm, but it wasn't that clear to me. Honestly, I honestly had to wind up with the bag to know exactly what was the problem in my past, what is the problem for all human beings, because I'm not an alien. I have the same anatomy as everybody else. I didn't take out my colon and say, "Oh, you have a strange colored sized colon, you're different from other humans." I'm the same as everybody else. I just had this proclivity of weakness in my gut, and it's amazing how I didn't notice until having the bag what caused the obstructions, the gas, the bloating. I think probably because it was mixed all in together, it was almost impossible to figure it out. I would have so much.
I think you're exactly right. I think that's a very wise statement, because the average person that's eating a mixed diet, eating the standard Western diet, you're eating so many different things all at the same time that you can't do any kind of experiment, because you literally have just eaten 42 different things all at the same time. And so you can't figure out what caused the problem. Now, let me ask you this question, Lee. After your diagnosis, when you got the diagnosis, I said, okay, you've got ulcerative colitis, Lee. You're going to have to really bump up your fiber intake. You're going to have to eat lots of brown rice, lots of whole grain bread, brown bread, lots of fiber, lots of vegetables, maybe fruit, juice smoothies and stuff. When you start, and I'm sure you were scared to death, so you started following that advice pretty close.
Yeah.
Did your symptoms improve when you started following the high fiber diet? Did they get worse? What happened to your symptoms?
The symptoms didn't change ever. That it was always the same. My life was on the same trajectory. Like I say, even though I felt like the symptoms were suppressed during a flare, sure, the medication felt convenient, but it wasn't changing what was going on. And as the years went by, it was noticeably worse. The frequency went up. The pain started to come on. I never usually used to feel pain with it. Like I say, I could eat a spicy Indian and just seem to get away with it. But then all of a sudden, I've got this huge problem, and now I can't do anything about it. I'm taking all the advice, and it's not getting any better. So the symptoms got worse, though the drug seemed to manage it in the very initial stages, just enough to make me feel like potentially I was on the right track. But far from the truth, because despite the medication, despite the dietary advice, I'd gone from low end mild to severe, riddled all the way up, from A to Z of my colon. No salvaging any of it.
Gotcha. And so you had the majority of your colon removed in what year?
2017.
2017.
Yes,
and so after that, you continued to eat a mixed diet. I'm sure we're still trying to eat lots of fiber, but now you had this new little thing in your life, this ostomy bag.
Yeah.
And so tell us, immediately you had the ostomy nurse taught you how to proper care for the ostomy, how to put your bag on, how to change your bag. How many times a day, back when you were still eating a mixed diet, did you have to change your bag on average?
Well, I would always change in the morning and of a night, and I still do that. I just believe in it. I like to be clean. I'm quite particular about management and stuff like that.
Sure.
The biggest difference was in the beginning, I was never, this is crazy to me, but I was never really challenged about the diet through the whole process, other than, them advocating and pushing more fiber. Right. When the bag came, they didn't really say, and funnily enough, they did give me a small piece of paper with a list of things that caused gas. funnily enough, every single one of these were plants. And so there were things like onions and mushrooms and different things that basically from the fiber that causes the gas. And so it's interesting that they don't put these two together and think, well, this potentially is a prevention for this condition, But I've wound out with this bag. And so there was a short list, but mostly it was just like, how to take care of it. When you're independent enough, we'll let you go home. They didn't even really say, don't eat this, don't eat that. This is going to make your life hard. I had to kind of figure that out as I went along, but it was only through becoming depressed due to the outcome of the surgery and me not being happy with it that I found the diet that would potentially have saved my colon, saved my depression, saved so many problems,
Right. And so after you had the colectomy, you've got your ostomy bag now, and you started, it wasn't by choice, but you started doing the trial and error experiments of different foods. And so which foods was it that you noticed immediately your bag swelling up with gas, or you noticed, man, there's undigested food in my bag? What was the evidence food that you saw right off the bat when you started having to live this new forced life?
Yeah, well, the list is pretty endless, honestly. But I mean, the biggest culprits straight away, I'd ordered some pizzas, because after a while you start to introduce, I can't wait to have my first burger. I can't wait to have a pizza. Well, pizzas come with all sorts of toppings.
Sure.
And so I'm obviously just chowing down these slices of pizza. And what I realized is things like pineapple and mango, like not that there was mango on there, but mushroom, these things don't break down whatsoever. So if I was to just bite into a chunk of pizza and just swallow a part of it, and the large part was a mushroom, that's exactly how it comes out in the bag. And so as it kinks round the corner, that's where you're most likely to have an obstruction. And I have had an obstruction with mushrooms. I also had one with brown rice. There was one time I was just eating what I thought was healthy, chicken, broccoli, rice, salted it. This brown rice and broccoli combined with the salt had created like a cement paste. And I woke up in the middle of the night and my stomach had almost folded over itself. It was so intense. So imagine you've got ulcerative colitis, you've got Crohn's, or even diverticulitis, and you're throwing, what looks, it's almost like sandpaper. You know what I mean? That you've got this rice that's not broken down, these sharp sort of inner and outer parts of the grain, and the broccoli and the cellulose and the lignin fibers and all of this just kind of traveling through where you've got ulcers. That would have just caused so much inflammation. And having this bag, if I didn't chew things like broccoli, mushroom, celery, mango, pineapple, the nuts and the seeds, I mean, you swallow an almond, the almond has to come out whole. And so these things are very, very inflammatory, no doubt about it. They cause gas, they cause all this bloatedness and discomfort and things like this, but they also cause inflammation and obstruction. So if people have constipation, it's most likely exacerbated by the amount of fiber that you're consuming. Certainly if you get the right mix of all these different fibers, it's almost like creating a cement paste, and good luck trying to have a healthy bowel movement with that.
Absolutely. And so I can actually speak from over 2 decades of experience being a family doctor. Bowel obstructions and bezoars, which is a particular kind of accretion that can happen in the human gut. I've never seen a bezoar that was composed in any way of meat or bacon or eggs. Literally, no. If it is caused by food, it's plant-based food. Bowel obstructions, when you have to go in surgically, it's 100% of the time it's some combination of grains and vegetables. And when you first got your ostomy bag and you were having to change it twice a day, it's human nature. You're going to look. Every time we poop in the pot, we look. But definitely you got to look really closely at your ostomy, make sure it's clean, make sure there's no sign of skin breakdown or infection. And you got to empty the bag. You got to deal with the bag. So what surprised you that you could actually see in the bag undigested? When you first started doing this, you're like, oh my God, there's a literal fill in the blank. What were the foods that you saw that you could visually identify in your ostomy?
Honestly, anything small that you don't even realize that you obviously can swallow, like a small sunflower seed or a raisin, or even like a very small berry. Sometimes you put a few in your mouth and you think you're chewing it all, but you've only chewed a few, and obviously some of them go down whole. They're right there in complete whole tact. Like if you rinsed it underwater, it's just not changed. So any small berries or anything small like nuts and seeds that you may not have chewed, and however you finish chewing any plant food, pretty much is how it comes out. So I always say to people, like, if you just took any fruit, any vegetable, a piece of celery, you just, you could even carve a specific shape into it and swallow it. I'm going to see that exact same food in that same shape go into the bag. And there's been a couple of times where I've realized, I ate mushrooms again last night. That's probably why I'm feeling like I've got chronic indigestion, because I've got an obstruction, and I literally have to push. And I obviously haven't done this for months and months, but I've pushed before, and you can feel it jet out, and there's just this whole little plant intact. So honestly, all plants, regardless of whether on a FODMAP list, I really disagree with all that FODMAPs as well, by the way. And I understand that they're higher in soluble fiber, but those things don't break down. If you swallow them, they're going to be the same. And so, for some reason, it's something to do with the plants and the, plant bones, as I call them, plant bones. That's what props plants upright. They're very robust structures. They don't want to break down. They're happy sitting there with all that acid, and they hold the plants up. Cellulose is only broken down by ruminants. Lignin doesn't break down across the board.
Right. Let's be very clear and accurate here. Even ruminant animals like cows and sheep and goats, they cannot break down cellulose.
Right,
they have bacterial friends who break down the cellulose for them. Without the bacteria, they can't break down the cellulose found in grass and other plants. So you saw, I was watching your story, you saw a video by Mikhaila Peterson and how she had used a carnivore diet to kind of put her rheumatoid arthritis and other issues into seeming remission. And what made you think, Lee, because it's kind of crazy for you to think, I think I'm just going to eat only meat. Yeah. Why did you make that decision based on Mikhaila's video?
I was definitely chronically depressed. I'd been depressed the day I got home, and my parents and my brother that next day went to work. I was depressed. It hit me that fast. I looked down. I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like how it felt. Everything was affected. I have to ask my bag's permission whether I can go for a walk, whether I can go to sleep, whether I can make love, anything. It's not down to me. I have to check with the bag first whether I can do that. It was getting in the way of everything, and I became very, very depressed. Got to the point where I went to the doctors, and they sent me a number, and I called this number, and it was a very extensive conversation where we went through multiple questions, very, very in depth. And I actually felt quite good after that. But there was this second call that was supposed to come, and it never did. And days went by, it was okay. Week went by, I thought, started to worry. A couple of weeks went by, and I was kind of like, I think I'm on my own here. And for some reason, I didn't go through the process again. I was almost waiting for something. I knew I didn't want to take the drugs. Maybe therapy could work, but I was waiting for something. I knew that I had to figure this out, maybe by myself. Well, anyway, I was sitting on the couch, and I just happened to stumble across her anecdote and her story on YouTube. I was just instantly taken. I expressed to Lucy, my partner, I've got to do this. I'm going to take this as an opportunity. I've got to believe that this can work for me, because this young lady, she's rid all of her problems. She was severely depressed like me. And, what have I got to lose? I decided to take a giant leap of faith and just believe in it and be very stubborn and strict with it. So after seeing the anecdote from Mikhaila, there were multiple other feeds coming up. So I was starting to get the grasp of the concept of the BBBE challenge, and certain other people told me about it. And so we just went to the store, and, as much as I wouldn't recommend doing this cold turkey, that I was desperate and we didn't know any different at the time. So jumped straight into the BBBE. And honestly, for the first 2 weeks, it was really hard. My energy, if anything, felt a little bit lower. I was going to bed about an hour earlier, going up the stairs thinking, oh man, I hope this works soon. Well, 3 weeks went by, and the contrast was just like, you couldn't believe it. I went to work. I remember I didn't even eat breakfast. I woke up, thought, I don't feel like breakfast, so I'm fine. I went to work, cleaned windows. It's a beautiful summer's day. And I just remember feeling I've just got so much energy. I was doing the windows, and a few jobs went by, and I was like, I actually feel happy. I was smiling, felt like a regular human. I was looking around and thinking, oh, this is what it's all about. This is how I'm supposed to feel. I ended up pulling over in my van and just recording my testimony, which originally I posted to Facebook because I just couldn't keep it to myself. I had gone from honestly severely depressed and to seemingly like a happy, robust person with all my markers improved. Like my acid reflux went the very first day. My skin improved. My energy was up. My sleep was up, and depression completely gone. I didn't have to go to the doctors. I didn't have to have therapy. I didn't have to take any more drugs. And then that's obviously when I started to learn about other patients with different ailments that have resolved their problems through the carnivore diet, and discovering other IBD patients that go in remission for years and they come off medication. And I was like, my goodness, this was the answer for me back then when I got the diagnosis, was to eat red meat, eat eggs, stay away from fiber, stay away from plants. It's just been a hell of a journey, it's happened by chance.
And now there are many people who believe in a plant-based diet who still truly and fervently believe that meat rots in your colon. Now, I have to be fair. There are no vegan influencers that I know of currently who are still repeating this lie, because that's exactly what it is, a big fat lie. A few years back, absolutely, they were either saying that implicitly or implying that. But the problem is, Lee, is the echo of the lie. Even though the vegan influencers and plant-based influencers aren't saying that meat rots in your colon anymore, because we've thoroughly debunked that, there are still millions of people out there who believe that meat that you eat does make it to your colon and sits there and rots and putrefies. So let me just ask you, as somebody who sees what comes out of their ileum, the terminal part of their small intestine, how many pieces of meat have you seen? And so in a normal person, when the food passes through the ileum, it would go into the large intestine, the colon. But you don't have a colon, and so it goes into your bag. How many times have you seen meat, red meat, bacon, eggs in your bag?
It just looks like stool. It is the stool. There is no recognizable matter of the meat and the egg. That I've swallowed chunks and it's liquefied the same way as if I was eating it. I mean, I've questioned this. You think about lions, and I'm not saying we should compare ourselves to other animals all the time, but lions, they don't need to really chew. If you look at dogs, they just swallow it. I'm not saying we should stop chewing our food, but our stomach acid is so acidic that it's very, very efficient at breaking down meat, eggs, all animal products. And so I've consumed every animal product I can think of. Honestly, I've like organs, meat, brain, eggs, raw, cooked, everything in between. Chewed a lot, not chewed at all. It's the same result for me.
So you're saying that even when you would chew plant foods thoroughly in your mind, you thought you chewed it thoroughly, you would still see evidence of it in the bag. You would see the little piece of nut, or the little piece of broccoli, or the little piece of corn, or whatever. But you've experimented with meat and actually tried to swallow partially chewed hunks of meat, thinking, I wonder if that'll make it all the way through. And you've yet to see a piece of meat in your ostomy bag. Is that?
Yeah, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's liquefied completely.
I've used your story and others, because if people, there's all this mythology about how many times you should chew your food. And I think that if you're eating meat and eggs and seafood and animal-based foods, the number of times you need to chew your food is just enough times so that you don't get choked when you swallow
it. So you can swallow it.
Literally 3 times, yes, swallow, it's fine. If you chewed it 3 times and you can swallow it, it's fine. But if it's plant food, you probably need to chew 32 or 33 or whatever the magic number of times is that the influencers are saying. But when it comes to meat and eggs and seafood, you chew it just like the dog, just like the lion. You chew just enough times so that you're not going to gag and get choked. That's enough times to chew your food if you're eating an animal-based diet.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, 100%.
And so you've actually done experiments where, like, I know I need to chew this piece of meat more, but I'm just going to swallow it just to see what happens. And still no evidence of any kind of meat coming out of your terminal ileum into your ostomy bag.
It's the same. And I've not had any obstructions either. I get basically zero gas. I mean, when I used to have like Indian takeaways, since having the bag, I would wake up and the bag would be like a balloon. That's all the onions.
Talk about that. So for people who've never seen one of these bags, it actually is an airtight seal to your skin. It has an adhesive that goes around the ostomy. and makes an airtight seal. And so if you eat something that causes your gas forming bacteria to get fired up, this balloon, it's just like a balloon. It's a plastic bag. It has a limited volume, right? And so what are the foods that your bag just blows up like a balloon if you eat them now?
Definitely onions are bad. Mushrooms are bad. But I think from the insoluble, you're just getting a lot of the hydrogen buildup. And then from the soluble, I think you're just getting a lot of methane. And so I think all plants produce gas. It's just which type. And I don't think it's beneficial for either. Like that's just a problem for us. Like you say, we have tiny cecums. Our colons are also very, very small compared relative to other primates and things like that. And so all plants cause gas. I could probably say, for me, mushrooms and onions are probably the worst, but all plants cause significantly more gas build up in the bag than meat. And I think the only air that I would get from eating meat would probably be from just taking air down while I'm eating, right?
Right.
Which is probably almost impossible to avoid completely. But
and how often back when you were eating a plant-based diet, because people want to say, oh, it's an omnivore diet or a mixed diet, but if you add up the total volume of food you're eating a day on the standard Western diet, it is a plant-based diet. About 70% of your food is plants.
Exactly.
How often would you get an obstruction where you would have to push either with the Valsalva maneuver or with your hands to kind of get the fecal matter to pass through? How often did that happen when you were eating plants?
It's going to be a funny thing to say, but it was almost impossible not to prod almost daily just to aid the process. When I added fiber, if I add fiber, you can feel your abs react to where the food is. When my food was trying to kink round and out into the bag, I would have abdominal spasms. They would flex and contract. And it was a constant reminder of my situation in the beginning. This kind of didn't help at all, my depression. I would look forward to food, and then I would hate food. I really developed a love-hate relationship with food when I was on the previous diet while having this bag. And my partner would tell me to stop pushing it, leave it alone, leave it alone. Every time I ate a very fibrous meal, which is quite often, honestly, it's very difficult to not press your stomach because you can feel it struggling. And so I've had one obstruction which hospitalized me just for a few hours. I've had two others which were very, very painful. I've probably had another few occasions where I had what I would describe as chronic indigestion, like trapped wind through an obstruction that passed, after a few hours. But every time I ate plants, on some level, there was obstruction because I'm unaware of the whole process. When I eat meat, I'm not reminded of where the food is if it's coming out. I almost have to check the bag to see, oh, it's still empty. Oh, it's still empty. It's fine. The plants, I would know when the food's about to hit the bag because I can feel it. It was very uncomfortable. And it's almost, like I say, it's almost impossible not to just press it out because it's right there. You can. Your stomach almost bulges up above the stoma and you can just press your stomach to help things. Well, I don't have to do that at all on meat. I don't even feel it.
So this is fascinating. This is actually the website for the Colitis and Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They're one of the largest organizations that provide support for people with Crohn's disease and colitis. And you can see that they get donations from Amgen and Takeda, which are pharmaceutical companies and medical supply companies. And then they obviously have the ubiquitous recipe page where they have all these recipes. And I was just going through this earlier this morning, Lee, and I was thinking, I wonder how many of these recipes, if Lee ate them, he would see evidence in his bag and he would probably have an obstruction and he would be having symptoms and discomfort. And then I noticed that, they also receive donations from Nestle, which and so basically the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation are owned by pharmaceutical companies and big food companies in the form of the donations they get from Nestle. Wonder how many of the recipes are use a Nestle product. And so let me ask you this, Lee. I'm sure you still have interaction with your gastroenterologist, with your ostomy nurse, with other people in medical healthcare. Have you discussed your your current diet with them. Look, I'm eating a carnivore diet now, and I literally never have an obstruction. I don't. My bag doesn't blow up with gas. Maybe you should start recommending this to your other patients. Have you had that conversation?
I have. It's strange because the moment I talk about it, I can instantly feel friction. I can feel like they don't want to entertain it. They're very dismissive. That every single time. So I've seen my surgeon since. I've seen a couple of stoma nurses since. One of my customers that I clean windows for, she's a psych therapist, and I spoke. Doesn't want to know. Doesn't matter what it is, because this seems to be the solution. It's not that it's magic. It's that all the other stuff is just poisonous and toxic and bad. So, but they don't want to know. So for some reason, it's offensive. And I think the reason why it's offensive is that they didn't know first, and that they've been recommending otherwise. And so I think that they take it personally, and they're sort of like, oh, well, be careful. Make sure you chew it, though. Make sure you chew, that you can, I get I can feel it, the energy. It's not, all of a sudden the room, it doesn't taste very nice, and they don't want me there. And they're just dismissive about it. They don't take it on. I'm sure they don't then go, oh, well, we've got a patient that has said that this helps, and maybe you should try that. I don't think that they're even considering that.
That's fascinating that they're going out of their way to recommend a high fiber diet, lots of vegetables, lots of whole grains. But then when they have a patient come to them and say, actually, I tried that and it made things worse. But when I'm eating a carnivore diet, it's much, much better.
Yeah.
Not only do they not want to recommend that, they don't even want to really talk about it.
No.
What do you think that says about the human nature of doctors and nurses just in general, and the nutrition and diets that they recommend to their patients? And even also, how do they view their patients as adults or as children? I mean, what's going on here with the human nature of this?
Yeah, I think if we had more open-minded people, that they didn't have to be right all the time. There's certainly levels of pride and ego involved, which often just gets in your own way, gets in the way of things. Again, I think it just comes back down to the fact that if they didn't know, they don't want to feel inferior. They don't want to be offended. It is offensive. I understand why you don't want to know. You don't want to hear it from me. I'm just a window cleaner. Who am I? But I'm the one with the bag. I'm the one that's done the experiments. And like one of my subscribers said to me, this isn't a study, and this isn't even anecdotal. This is reality. I actually see reality.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. This is not a study. He literally can look with his human eyeballs at what came out of his body, and he can see what was digested and what was not digested. This is not even anything that has to be experimented with. And I've talked to multiple other people with ostomies at different levels, and without exception, Lee, not a single person has ever said, oh, I see big chunks of ribeye or big chunks of bacon. I have to chew my meat really thoroughly or it'll wind up in the bag. Every single one of them. And some of them, it's a surprise. They're like, I've never actually thought about that.
Yeah.
But no, I've never seen any meat, but definitely broccoli, definitely corn, definitely peanuts, 100%. Yes, mushrooms, but I've never seen meat. And they're kind of surprised that they've never made that connection before. Now, I suspect if you could go back in time, Lee, and go back before your first flare up and say, hey, younger Lee, you need to start. What dietary recommendations would you make to your younger self if you could go back in time? And at the same time, anybody watching this who has ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or irritable bowel disease, ulcerative colitis is a subset of IBD. What recommendations would you make to these people or to your younger self?
Yeah, I mean, I've got two answers. So the first one is realistic. It's more aimed towards people that are going through the situation, or if I could go back and I was just that selfish to save me and only me, I would definitely recommend saying you need to prioritize weaning off of carbohydrates, starting with the most fibrous. Take it slow. There's no rush, but by the end of it, maybe after 2 months, you don't want to have a single piece of plant matter in your diet whatsoever. Increase the red meat while you cut things out. Substitute certain things like grains if you're going to cut them out with things like eggs and bacon. And focus mostly on red meat if you can, and just basically tell myself that it's what you feel like about this stuff is completely almost the opposite. Red meat doesn't exacerbate constipation. Plants do. Red meat is nutrient dense and non-inflammatory. Plants are inflammatory and not so nutrient dense. It's the opposite of what we've been told. So wean off of carbohydrates, starting with the most fibrous. I would potentially even leave things like bananas, potatoes, and white rice in last, while you wean off of the worst stuff. You're going to straight away feel relief even for that. I'm not advocating for rice, bananas, and potatoes, but at least that stuff is pliable. It's not fibrous. It's kind of more easy on the gut. And then slowly but surely get rid of them too, because we don't want all that sugar in the diet. And then just focus on your red meat and enjoy it. Eat that beautiful red meat and the eggs, and when you're hungry, and eat as much of it as you want. And that's it. That's what I would recommend.
Brilliant. So let me ask you another question. Why do you think that your surgeon, your doctors, your nurses, why are they so completely unreceptive to your discovery, which is, you're not the first person to discover this. Basically, everybody with an ostomy knows what comes out in the bag and what doesn't. Why do you think they have no desire? They just literally don't care. Because here's the thing. What if you told your surgeon, dude, I have started drinking stump water. Like every time I find an old stump that's rotten, if there's a collection of water, I've started drinking that, and my obstructions are gone. I have no gas anymore. Literally, I can't feel. There's no pain, no discomfort, no tenesmus. I think the surgeon would be more interested in your stump water discovery, or if you found some weird herb or some weird berry from the Himalayan mountains, right? That you're like, every time I eat this maca berry from the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, I have no symptoms. Do you think they'd be more interested in that than when you say, hey, I just eat red meat and eggs, and I have no symptoms and I never see anything in my bag? What's going on there?
Honestly, I don't know, because I've thought about it. Is it really that they're just that inured? Is it money? Like, what is it? I mean, our situation's slightly different from over in the States, but there's money, always money with drugs.
You think money may play some part? Here's the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation website, nonprofit, who lists Nestle as one of their biggest donors. So you actually think there may be some kind of monetary issue here?
There's 100% a percentage of at least people involved in the situation in the system that are interested in money. Maybe certain of other people are innocent, but they're in a position where they just didn't know, they're ignorant, and they don't feel that they're in a position to actually do anything about it, whether it was correct information or not. So I think a lot of medical doctors and physicians and things like that, they mean well, they're good people, and their heart's in the right place, but they're just regurgitating this same confirmation bias with the misinformation. I don't think it's disinformation, but on the money side of things, there's definitely disinformation and bias, where they don't print a study because there's money to be lost, or they print this study because there's money to be made. I think that there's a combination of two things going on there, where someone perhaps they got their heart in the right place, but they don't have the power in their position to do anything about it because someone above them is interested in making a lot of money.
Do you believe in your heart of hearts, Lee, that if you had discovered a carnivore diet after your first ulcerative colitis flare-up, that you'd still have your colon today?
Yes, I would still have my colon. I'm very, very confident in that, because I don't have any kind of inflammatory markers that are worrying. I know how these things work and how they don't break down the plants. It's not just fiber, but you've got to think that when you're eating things like whole grains, not only is there fiber, but there's gluten and wheat. They're also a problem. There's lectins. They also have been shown to cause inflammation in the gut. So, you eat whole grains, there's a multitude of issues there. Well, I don't eat plants, so all of those problems are there. Someone might say, well, alcohol. Well, I don't drink alcohol because it's from a plant. I don't touch anything from a plant, not even pepper on my steak, nothing. So I think if I went on a pure carnivore diet when I first got diagnosed, I went the first 2 years without medication, so I would most likely have just never needed medication. Maybe flared here and there, I don't know, but it just depends on perhaps how chronic it was in me innately. But I think that all of these things are triggered. I think that all of these things have triggers, and the plants, depending on what aspect of the plant, maybe my biggest enemy was that indigestible portion, the carbohydrate portion of the plant that doesn't break down, that caused my problems. But there's a whole multitude of problems. Take them out, I can't see that I would have ever lost my colon. I would have ever been depressed. Maybe my acne would never have been a thing. All of it,
Yep, Absolutely. So I want to leave you with this parting opportunity to talk to every young person out there who's either fears that they have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or IBD, or they've already been diagnosed and they're trying to follow the guidelines and regulations. My doc said eat more of this, avoid this. Talk to that young person. And any of you guys watching this, if you have a family member or a friend who has colon problems, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, IBD, IBS, please share this video with them, because you literally could save their colon, maybe even save their life. Talk to that young person, Lee, and tell them here's what's up and here's what you need to do.
I think this applies to everyone in all, reality. We don't need to overcomplicate things. I think that so many people spend so much time thinking about, well, what do I eat? I'm special. What do I eat? I've lost this body part. What do I eat? I have this disease. If every species ate what they were supposed to eat, we wouldn't, that's it. It's just like we've forgotten what we're supposed to eat. And so if you eat red meat, and that's what we're designed to eat, regardless of what you believe in, you can believe in evolution, you can believe in creation, or a hybridized version of either, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can look at the anatomy, you can see the history, we are absolutely designed to metabolize gently fats and proteins from animals, mostly ruminant animals. It's the purest, most non-inflammatory, nutrient-dense food. So if you're interested in health, you should care about what you put in your body. So you don't want to be consuming anything that's toxic. Red meat isn't toxic. Eggs aren't toxic. And if you want to be healthy, you should be nourished. Well, they contain the most nutrients out of every other substrate, no matter how compatible you think that substrate is. Red meat is king, eggs probably second, maybe things like, bone marrow and butter perhaps, but that's the stuff you should be focusing on. And you may think that you're an exception, like, no, I would die if I didn't have carbohydrates, so I can't do this, I can't do it. Just take it really, really slow and trust just nature. It's natural. Like your body is so complicated, but it's designed to do that. I think we overcomplicate the whole process of thinking about, well, what shall I eat? What shall I eat? I'm an athlete. I go to the gym. I've got this problem. Eat what you call the proper human diet. That is the solution. And you don't need to flare. You don't need to go down to your doctors for medication. If you go to your doctors for nutritional and dietary advice, that's not going to be very helpful to you. Mostly, you may have the rarity. This fella that seems to just, have his heart in the right place. He's a doctor, but also he just knows about all of this stuff. I'm not going to profess to know everything, but unless you meet that rarity of a doctor, I don't think you should be taking nutritional advice, even from dietitians and nutritionists, because every single one of them base their knowledge off of corrupt guidelines and corrupt history. It's just not accurate, and so it's not helpful. If it's not accurate, it's not helpful. And that's my whole thing. I don't post it if it's not accurate and helpful. So this is why we're doing this, is just to help people. I've been through hell and back. And it's like the second part of the previous question you were answering. If I could go back and tell myself, I actually wouldn't. My life has so much more meaning and purpose through what I've gone through. I wouldn't take it back for anything. Mm-hmm. I've helped so many people, more than just me, that I could never go back and tell myself and change history like that. I'm happy. I'm not depressed anymore. I'm happy I've found answers, meaningful answers, and I get to share this with people that are suffering, that may never have come across that information, if I hadn't been on this path.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Lee, for doing this and sharing this. I know it's got to be a little uncomfortable talking about this stuff, but I think it's important that you keep talking about this, because there are people out there suffering who just don't know this. They've never been told this by a doctor or a dietitian, and hopefully just hearing it from you, just like you heard it from Mikhaila Peterson. They'll hear this crazy guy, Kent Carnivore, on YouTube said, hey, just eat meat and eggs and your colon will thank you for it. So thank you very much for stepping out of your comfort zone and talking about this.
Absolutely.